Betwixt the between, uh, we sit with mountains on three sides of us. So we don't have very much sunlight. It comes around about 8:30 in the morning and it's gone by about 3:30 in the afternoon. And then otherwise it's shadowy or just dark. And I was thinking about that in terms of Advent in the Northern Hemisphere, I assume most of you are, that that we have a lot of darkness around us. And some people just don't like the dark. They just can't take it, and they look for something else. But I like to think that it doesn't have to be totally dark. In other words, what's the plus of darkness? And I think the plus is if you light one candle, it really shines out. If you were to light one candle in the middle of the day, it wouldn't make any difference in terms of the ambiance of where you lit it. But for instance, our chapel at night is very dark. Early in the morning when we begin prayer, very dark. And we light one candle the first week because we have an Advent wreath. And I think that's the benefit of Advent wreaths. Uh, and at least part of it is that one light. And it really makes a difference. And what I think it can make a difference, not only in just your whole mood, not just the idea that, well, Christ is light in the darkness of the world and so on and so forth. Yes, but maybe you can be that light when you're going about. I'm not going to beat you up about the bedlam and frenzy of this season, commercially called Happy Holidays, because I know people who love to get out there and do things on the holidays. And they're just really into it. So, whether you are or not, I think the important thing is how are you into it? Are you going to be stressed, for instance, or are you going to be a light for others? So that think of Advent in terms of every encounter you have that is, say, different because it's this time of year. You're shopping for lights, decoration lights, let's say, that you don't shop for the rest of the year. How are you present to the people around you, the person who is at the cash register, the person who's helping you, another person in the parking lot? How are you with those people? Are you going to be a light? Because they could be in a lot of darkness themselves. That is the way they're feeling emotionally or whatever. They could be having just a terrible time this year due to any number of things and reasons: poverty, divorce, recent death of a loved one. Um, you don't know. But if you can bring your best self to that, you become that Advent candle light, and you won't know the results of what you do any more than next Sunday you'll be hearing the gospel with John the Baptist gets the message. Uh, he gets a message out in the desert, and he's definitely alone. A lot of solitude in his life. So solitude isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'll get to that in a minute. But he gets a message and he proclaims the message. He's not in charge of the results. He's only in charge of being the message. And he looks very odd to a lot of people, but he doesn't worry about it. Eats locusts, wild honey, dressed in a camel's hair. He doesn't worry about it. What he does say is, I've got to be John the Baptist and the best John the Baptist I can be. And that's probably why he got God's message, and he just proclaims it. Message of repentance, preparation. So you want to be the kind of person who is the message, that you don't necessarily have to be using words, unless somebody actually asks you a question about the season that could allow you to talk about Christmas, what it means to you. If they ask, not. schedule or your bucket list of things to do for this season, I don't think you're going to be the message. I think one of the things that come up this time of year are social events. Now, COVID has cut back on a lot of this and of social events because it's this season of the year. And one reason or another, mask or whatever, I'd probably wear a mask. You might ask yourself, who you walk into the room and you've got your own ideas. Who do I know? Who don't I know? Who I talk to? What if you could just let that go for a minute? Let go of being all about how you feel. Let go of it all being all about yourself and walk into the room. I've tried this because I used to go into rooms where there was a party and I said, who will I know and who will I talk to? Because I don't want to stand there looking like I don't know what to do or say or whatever. I used to be that way. You know what I decided? I said, who's the visitor? Well, aren't you all visitor? But who looks like the visitor? You know, you can walk into an event, you can see people who are very, very good at either working the room or they're having a nice conversation with somebody. But there's often somebody in that room who you just know looks like you might feel. And now with a mask, it's a little bit harder, but their eyes, they're not really quite talking to anybody. They have a little glass of something in their hand, maybe a little bit of food. Why don't you walk up to them? And it gets you out of yourself. It gets you out of that. Do I fit in? How do I fit in? Well, look at John the Baptist. Did he fit in? He didn't look like he fit in at all. But that seems to be who God comes to, no? Yes, God seems to come to the ones you least expect. I mean, when Jesus is born in Bethlehem and they got him in the manger all swaddling clothes, who's the angel go to? The outlier, the shepherds. They're not part of the in crowd. They're not part of everybody ignores them. They stink. They're thought to be really low lives, the shepherds, and didn't say they were sheep owners. They just said they were watching the sheep. That's all they were doing. They could have been day laborers or night. God's come to you. So why don't you be the angel for somebody? And that person who's detached, and welcome that person. You can try it at church. If you go to church, you're all safely masked or whatever. You can somebody's just all alone, say hello, how are you today? They may not be doing too well at all. How do you know? But you're putting yourself out there. Somebody said Aristotle. We all remember that. Well, Aristotle said one person alone is not a person at all. Now, I don't think he was talking about solitude and silence and stillness, which we have here, but it's the sense of something should come from your prayer life that connects to the world. John had a lot of prayer life. You know, he spent a lot of time in the desert with John, and hope he liked himself. It wasn't until he was kind of along the way of an adulthood that he finally got the message. Otherwise, he was just going to be in his silence and solitude, and nobody knew about him. But when he went out with that message, it was the results, the sort of the benefit of his solitude and silence in terms of that being available to others. I mean, Chris and I, our director or producer here, have been thinking about this, that a lot of people say, you know, this isn't like church. Church, you're really with people. Well, I see a lot of people go to church by themselves. They leave by themselves. They don't talk to anybody. So, but let's say you do. Well, why don't people just talk to one another on Zoom like we're thinking of doing afterwards? I mean, you are a community. We are a community of people, however many are listening today. And it is the benefit of showing up for the actual talk is there's other people, and they may be willing to stay around, and they may say, "Well, I don't know if I have anything to say." Well, if you something comes up, something might come out of this talk of mine, then why not share it? If people want to stay, they stay. If they don't, they don't. You're never in charge of the results. You're only in charge of putting yourself out. And you know what you get to practice? Tolerance. I've been in Zoom meetings and I'm listening to somebody else and I say, oh, oh, oh. But what do? I get to accept that person as they are. I'm not in the world to change them necessarily. I'm in the world to proclaim if it helps them, good. So I get to practice tolerance. Uh, so I find that it's very important to practice a bit of silence and solitude. And what is it that COVID has given us? It's interrupt gatherings. It's interrupt interactions with people. I said all that. So it is giving us an opportunity to enter into our own darkness and light a candle. If in your meditation, COVID can interrupt a lot of things, but it does not have to interrupt the joy that can be in your heart. And that joy, we think, is about Christ coming into our life in a surprising, uninvited manner, trying to celebrate it emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Christ is coming. We know there's going to be a second coming as well. We might ask ourselves, how ready are we for that? And in the gospel for last Sunday, it did talk about the roaring of the waters and so on and so forth. Wow, oh, I don't know if I want that. Well, what about your own internal roarings, the roarings of our insides that can sometimes come from this time of a year when there can be self-imposed demands put upon ourselves. And we have to still that roaring. And Christ coming, it says he's going to come into our lives. And he says, what are the things to avoid? Anxieties of daily life. And I think that's a great thing that meditation does. At least it helps us to get a little bit detached from the anxieties of daily life. And December can have a lot more anxieties of daily life, depending upon how we go about it. And I think we need to keep that in mind. So solitude can be a blessing, be used. God can use anything, the roaring of the seas, to express God's coming into our life. One of the things, if you do give gifts, say you give gifts to a relative, a grandchild, a nephew, a niece, grandnephew, something like that. Or these Jesse tree things, I remember. They're probably not doing much Jesse tree now, but the idea was a child asked for something, and your job was to go get that child what they asked for. But what do they ask for a lot? They ask for passing things. Jesus coming into our life is not a passing thing. It's a permanent thing. And so what do they ask for? They ask for current fads, game toys, clothes. I mean, they may wear the clothes for a little while, then they're out of style. They may play the game for a little while, they break it, that's out of style. Why not give a gift that will be remembered? Not a short-term gift, a come and go gift, but give something that will be, when I say remembered, I don't mean they'll find it valuable now. Okay, you give a child a game, they play the game for a little while, they get tired of it, they toss it away. Give him something very small. What if you gave him a medal? Okay, I'm Catholic, all right? What if you were to give them a medal, a miraculous medal? Let's say, I remember miraculous medals, or a cross you could wear around their neck or just pin on them or whatever. What are they going to do? They're not going to throw it in the garbage, though. I don't think. Because you said it was precious and you are a precious person in their life. They put it in a drawer. They don't want it now, but they don't throw it away like they did the toy or the clothes that wear out and they go to Goodwill. You know what's going to happen? I've seen this time and time again. Or you give them a book, maybe a little Bible or something, a little prayer book. They toss it someplace. 3 years later, they're going into that same area where they put something and they see it. They're a different person 3 years later. See, you're not in charge of the results. They may look at that just at the right time. Think of two things. The person who gave it to them loved them. Maybe 3 years from now, they don't feel very loved. And secondly, there is a God. At least the person who gave it to them thought there is a God. And maybe I better think about that a little bit. You never know. And that's what I call grace. Grace acts at the right time. You just give the gift. Don't worry about what happens to it. That's what I mean by a gift that is remembered. It could be a book. I think of a religious article. Grace will act in God's time through things. It doesn't have to be things, but through things, God can act. What the heck do you think the sacraments are in the Catholic Church? They're things. And it's called, it's a great phrase, it's called giving reality to the eternal. The little medal you gave is real. You can feel it, you can see it, and that's real. But it represents something of the eternal. That's what a sacrament is. It's taking a thing, a real thing, a piece of bread, little wine, oil, water, and it's using it to express the eternal. So that's what you're doing. You're giving reality to the eternal. Clothes, games, they feed on fads. They come and go. And what's so wonderful about Jesus coming into our life is he's here to stay. And the question is, how about you? Are you here to stay with him? So are you going to be the reality that expresses the eternal? When you gave that little medal, you are the reality, the older relative or whatever, the teacher, or whatever you are. That made a big difference in their lives. So we have to remember in this day and age that we don't, you can talk about it. I've heard people say, we're the right religion, whatever your religion is or your belief system. We're right, everybody else is wrong. Well, that was that was something of the medieval, the Reformation, the Age of Enlightenment, certainty. We're in what's called postmodernism. That is, the viewer looks at something and says, this is what it is. But what it says it is depends also on the viewer. Another viewer looks at the same thing and says, no, it's not. We found this out with electrons. Science is telling us now. Postmodernism says everybody has their view. And my view is my view. It's the way I see things. In other words, maybe there's not an absolute truth, says postmodernism. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You just need to be your truth. And your truth is Christ is coming. When you come into someone's life, is that Christ coming into their life? That's what you may ask. And what do you care if they say they don't believe? Well, you do care. But remember, we say God is love, even though it talks about the roaring of the seas and all. God is love. And I think if you look at the first reading for this coming Sunday, you can see some very good things being said. See the children gathered in the east and the west. I mean, they're so impressionable. So we just have to remember that we have to speak what we believe is our truth and not try to convince somebody, just be it. And I think that's what Jesus never came into the world and says, I'm right and everybody else is wrong. He suggested a way of living. And I think that's what we can do. Not say, I'm right, you're wrong. We're not here to convince people of anything. Just to be the good news in the midst of a postmodern world in which everybody says, I'll believe what I want to believe. Well, I don't know how that's going to get them anywhere, but that's not my job. My job is to be, not just to say, I believe this is the truth. but to be it. And I don't think I can be it unless I've got enough time for solitude and silence in my life, because that's when I'm going to spend some time alone with this one who's supposed to be so important in my life. We say God is so important in my life. Well, say you were absolutely in love with another person. Wouldn't you want to spend some alone time with that person? Oh, you might enjoy being with other people with that person, but you really want some alone time with that person because you really love them. So what's so bad about spending alone time with the God that you say you love, who certainly loves you, because uh, Jesus Christ did not come into our lives. The Christ, the second person in the Trinity, principle behind all his creation, God, self-emptying. We know that side. We know God loves us and wants to spend private time with us. So it's suggested that we do take time for solitude in our own, close our eyes in our own darkness and let Christ be the light. And again, light a candle in the room, just to help you, to remind you you're not alone, because sometimes in solitude and silence, you're going to feel alone. You're going to feel bored, and so on and so forth. But uh, you need to spend this time by yourself with God, just to test and see how ready am I for your loving me. And you may not be um, as ready as you like to be. Uh, so Advent is not so much about a time of telling everybody how certain your religious belief is. Advent is a time of love in kindness, tolerance, acceptance. One of the things we have to accept is there's a lot of things in short supply. And you may not be able to find something that you want. You want certain lights for a tree. We're putting up our tree this Friday morning at the monastery. It's at least 9 feet tall. It's a huge tree, and we have to put it together and so on and so forth. And we're hoping that we have enough lights. You know, the thought, oh, there'll be plenty of lights in the store. There'll be plenty of decorations. We don't know that because so many things are in short supply. But it is a time of acceptance and gratitude that Christ is coming into our life. And our tree, when it's all lit up in our big dining room, 9 feet tall at least, maybe 10, it's so beautiful. When you walk into the dark room early in the morning, it's dark outside, and that tree, oh, it just really brings it to me. And of course, our tree is right next to the crucifix. Great reminder, Christ is this loving light in our life, and the crucifix says ultimately gives all. So we might ask ourselves if we can do that kind of giving all to God. Well, no, not necessarily, but at least if we could give some, like some time each day. I mean, here I try to do a meditation early in the morning before breakfast. Before my breakfast, and again in the evening, and sometimes in the middle of the day, a time just to be, if you would, alone with God, although there might be other people in the room that are meditating. So keep that in mind, because this world we're in now can cut down on a lot of frenzy, because we can't do a lot of stuff. But look at it also as the flip side of it, that maybe not having so much frenzy can be a bit of a blessing. And what can we use the non-frenzied time that has been given to us for? Uh, we no longer have to wear ourselves out on peripheral stuff if it wears us out. Again, there are people who absolutely love to get out there. I mean, I know in the monastery, I love decorating the Christmas tree. Not every monk likes the decorated Christmas tree. And I don't know why. Not every person likes it. I mean, I've been in polished houses, and I go out and shop for the tree when we used to get real trees and bring it home and want to put it up. And sometimes hardly anybody would do it. It could be they had a terrible experience as young people growing up, and they just don't have anything to do with Christmas. It reminds them of terrible things. Their parents were drunks, and it was all chaos, and so on and so forth. Or they had a great experience with their parents, and their parents are dead, and they really depresses them that they don't have their loved ones around them anymore. They don't want to have anything to do with putting up a tree. You just don't know. And I say it's not my job to figure out why one monk or another doesn't want to decorate a tree. My job is to decorate the tree and to do it with all the joy that I can bring to it. Now, of course, what I'm thinking of is we're going to have special food. I'm thinking of putting a notice on the board: special food for Santa's helpers, not so special for others. But that would be cruel. So you see, so that's the devil on the shoulder and the good angel on the shoulder, as we used to remember. See, Advent is also a time to check ourselves out and to say, how much of a gift am I to God, or how much of my own messiness am I bringing to the stage, to the Christmas season? And so, just because you have a thought, you don't have to pay attention to it. And so, I mean, I'm afraid Santa's not going to come here because there's shortages. I hear there's a rumor that he has can't find enough helpers, just like everybody can't find enough workers, and he can't find enough reindeer. So he's cutting back and only going to the big cities. I was thinking of going to San Francisco because he was going out there, hang my stocking out there. But I don't even know if they'll have a tree in that house. I'm staying here at the monastery, putting my stocking up, and see what happens. If I end up with coal, well, I guess I haven't been so good this year. But isn't that so much? We have so many stories from, well, some of us have just so many good stories of when we were growing up. And it can be a time to look back in memories. But let's bring it to a spiritual place. Are there some good memories, interior spiritual life memories that you have from the past that you can bring up? Not that you have to relive them. You know, you can't go back and relive being in the 8th grade with your friends. But it's not to relive them, but just to be a reminder, especially in times when you feel a little, out of sorts. A reminder, if you did have some good experiences, a reminder of how good this season can be with Christ in our life. Because what you're remembering is good spiritual moments. Maybe it was a midnight mass you went to, or an early morning mass. I can remember altar boy things and so on. Okay, on the other hand, you have terrible experiences at Christmas. Ooh, it's awful. I think that Jesus Christ came into the world, especially for people who are suffering. Come to me, all you who labor, who are burdened, who are labored, find life burdensome. It's, hey, I'm here for you. Because the people who are just happy times don't think they need God at all. They're doing just fine. How can God come for them? How can God be? God comes for them, but they can't recognize it. So I think when you're down, maybe this Advent season can remind you, he came for you too. He came especially for you, and he would die for you. So you're never alone. I mean, I know there's going to be people this season who are going to think of doing great damage to themselves because they just see the darkness. It's loneliness. It's not solitude. It's loneliness, abject loneliness. And you never know when you will pass by that person in just your going about. I think that this season, especially, is a season of high emotion, very low and very high. That there's a lot of people who are going to especially suffer because they're expected at this time of year to be happy. That's what the consumer advertising shows: happiness, families being happy, and they're not happy. They're having a terrible time. I remember years and years ago, I think I told a little bit of the story last year, Christmas night, I was washing the floor of a restaurant. And the owner of the restaurant was a really mean person to me as well. And I'm saying, why? What is this? What my life is? Christmas night out in California, 3,000 miles away from my parents, my family. I'm washing a kitchen. I'm washing a kitchen. It was a huge restaurant kitchen. I think I was doing the whole restaurant. Boy, let me tell you, I needed to have Christ be in my life then. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. There are people who end up in bars on Christmas Day alone. It's not so much that they hate Christmas, they got nothing else to do. And some may. But you never know when you run into that person during these 4 weeks or 3.5 weeks that we have left in just your going about during the day and your just interaction with people. You just don't know. And so the attitude that you bring to it says something about what this season means to you. Christ coming into my life makes me positive. Being abject, lonely, and alone, and nobody caring, that would really make me quite miserable. So I encourage you to take solitude time to enjoy the presence of this lover that wants to come into your own personal life. And then, however you do it, maybe it's writing a Christmas card to somebody. I mean, the post office is a little spotty up here. They don't come every day anymore. And we never know when they're coming or not coming. Again, we're not in charge of the results, but I can send somebody a card. And sometimes when I'm going about, and all of a sudden I think of someone, I says, oh, I bet they'd enjoy a Christmas card. What inspired me to think of them? Haven't thought of them in quite some time. That's what I call grace. It's a moment when, oh, why would I think of doing that? God's at work in you. And you just send them off a little something, a little note. We have some Christmas cards here that we got in the monastery. The abbot got us some cards. And again, some guys send no cards. That's fine. That's not my job to get anybody to anything. And it's not even my job to say you should send cards. So no, I'm not doing any shoulds. I'm just saying, what is it that gives me life at this time of year when I'm supposedly preparing for Christ coming into my life? And I would say that would be one of the things. If I'm sitting down saying, I got to write these cards, forget it. Spare yourself and spare the person that you're sending it to. And it's just not. What good is it to get to Christmas Day and be totally exhausted and say, throw your tree out in the road? I've seen that. People have thrown their Christmas trees out Christmas Day. They are so sick of it. They weren't waiting for Christ. That was happy holidays, and they weren't very happy at all. So I'm trying to avoid all that and get away from it and keep in mind that, just a second, keep in mind that Christ is working on me in one way or another. And I think that we keep in mind that we are Christ and the light of Christ for people around us, whether we know it or not. And what we need to be able to do is find a way to be that on a daily basis and don't worry about the results. And if we can do that, I think we're going to be just fine. Now, I'm going to end with this. I think I've only been going a little over a half hour, but I think there's a lot of stuff in there for us to look at. I will say this about the upcoming reading this week. It is preparing us for Jesus by moving us from the cosmic sense of the end, global warming, who knows? It's going to move us from the cosmic sense of second coming now to someone who is actually physically, emotionally, and spiritually preparing for the Christ, the Messiah, the Savior, coming into his life. And so when you have that, you have John the Baptist. And when you look at John the Baptist, I think what you see is a man who has really given a lot of himself to this. Notice how the gospel starts out. It names important people, governors, emperors, mucky-muck religious leaders. Message doesn't come to any of them. It comes to John the Baptist, guy kind of on his own, like sometimes you feel living in a COVID Zoom world. You know, a lot of people say nowadays, why doesn't the government fix things? Why doesn't the church in Rome fix things? Well, the gospel starts out with the government and the religious institution and bypasses it. That's an important thing to keep in mind. God's not looking for either of those places to do much of anything. It comes to one person. And one person is not too worried about what he's eating or how he looks or however the people think of him. And he has spent a lot of time in solitude and silence. And he says, it's my job to let people know what's going on. And he's telling other people, hey, prepare a path, make a straight way. And that's what you do when you go out in this Advent season and around or contact people one way or the other, even on Zoom. What you do is you're the light of Christ. You are trying to prepare the way, and your attitude may suggest they prepare the way. Here, it looks like geography. Hills are made flat, valleys are lifted up so that it's a smooth road. What your life is to make it a smoother road for Christ coming into the world of other people. Now, see, we say, well, you know, Christ's already come. Yeah, to you. But maybe not to somebody else you meet on the street, not on the street, in a store, in another social engagement, at a party or something. Christ may not have come to them yet. This could be their first time. And there's something about you that suggests that there is a Christ and does want to come into their lives. And so you've actually made the valleys come up, the mountains go down, and smooth the way so that more and more people can recognize this unconditional love and acceptance that's coming into their lives. So it's a good season of the year to stop complaining that the government's not doing enough. The church isn't doing enough. They weren't back in Jesus' time because things were terrible. And John seemed like, what can he do? He's all by himself. He can't be any good. Well, he was pretty good. So never underestimate grace. Grace says that you are enough for God's message to be proclaimed. In this Advent season especially, you can be that light in the darkness. Okay, we'll be back next week, but you all get a chance to stay. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris. This is recorded. And of course, if you want to support me, there's always COVID. No, there's always Venmo. Oh, I'm on the way out.
Don't support him with COVID.
Yes, send me some COVID. Okay, stop. I'm done. The brain's gone. Venmo, Chris will put that up, or just send me a check here at the monastery. Especially if Santa's not coming, I'm in big trouble. But you know, God loves me, and what the heck? I'll just I'll eat locusts and wear camel's hair. All right, take care. Chris is going to take over.
All right, thanks, Father Terry. For those that like to stay on, I would. We can have a kind of a catch-all group. I've got some great questions from Father Terry's session, or those who would like to break into a smaller group into 3 to 5 people. It looks like we've got about 26 people participating. So if you would like to break into a smaller group of 3 or 4 people, I'll give everybody the questions and then you can discuss. But I will leave it on for kind of a catch-all group for everybody else. So if anybody wants to join a smaller group and not part of our larger group, just raise your hand at the bottom and I will start moving people into a breakout room. And if you have to leave, yeah, some people said they're leaving, that is fine. This is just open for you, open for our community. Definitely understand that you got other things to do on a Wednesday afternoon too. So, and I think everybody wants to stay a part of the big group. If I missed anybody, let me know, but it looks like everybody wants to stay a part of the big group. So I guess my, one of the most, just listening to Father Terry today, one of the most interesting books I've read all year is the book called Think Again. And it's from a organizational psychologist who works for corporations. And his whole premise is, how often do we think again about our religious beliefs, our political beliefs, and those things? We change our car, our house, the home decor, our clothes, all those different things that we get, follow trends, our Starbucks coffee, whatever that is. But how often do we rethink our values? And I think Advent is that time. And what Father Terry was talking about is, where are we waking up in the divine something new this week? What's new? And then are we aware of that grace that God has? And I love Father Terry's expression here of, how do we live? How are we an expression, or how do we do an infinite eternity? How are we that eternal reality? So practically, how can you be the reality that expresses an infinite eternity? And you can unmute yourself to talk. All right, I'll ask some more questions. If you have a reflection or something that you want to share, please feel free to interrupt me and unmute yourself and ask, or ask on chat. How can we make more time for solitude? How can we slow down? How is your life more of tolerance and gratitude? I love what Father Terry said, not of certainty, but really what he's talking about is of faith. What are we missing? And how are you smoothing the road for other people? I love that expression that Father Terry, how are we smoothing the road for other people? So those are some questions I came up with. If you have a question or some kind of reflection or some kind of response, please feel free to talk.
Well, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
All right. So listening to Father Terry, what I took away with this time was that I'm not in charge of the results. And sometimes I try to be. I'm only in charge of what I do. And that made me think about things that are going on in my life right now, that I can only do what I can do, and I have to give up the results. So I appreciated that.
Oh, I love that. That's great. No, definitely that we're, whatever is, regardless of what other people do, we're not in charge of those results. We just have to be in that sense and do what we're called to do and do the right thing in that sense. No, I love that. It's a good point.
Also, I think the whole concept of being the candle, being the light, and this certainly is a season for that. And I think with the new variant strains, everything like that, all of us can carry so much anxiety. But if we recognize just other people, the other people who surround our lives on a daily basis, that's real Advent of being that candle.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think Father Terry is trying to engage us in not waiting for somebody else to do it, but how can we, just around the people we know, like I was on vacation last week with my family, but in North Carolina, but how can, my wife and I were thinking about how can we engage this community that we're a part of there in this small town in North Carolina, and what things can we do just to be helpful? And my wife was reaching out to a guy who, couldn't open the door or whatever, and she made the time to do that, or asked somebody if they needed some help and those type things. So I think during Advent season, and my wife teaches me every day because this is the way she is every day, but during Advent season especially, is the world that's around us, what can we do to help others in that sense and be that light?
Mhm. Well, I think it's the reaching out to others. I got in some sort of a discussion last week when our parish priest kept saying that all of us needed to go spend at least sometime one day a week in adoration of the Blessed Sacrament to meet Jesus. And I got in a sort of almost argument with several people about that. I said, to me, Jesus is outside that church. To me, Jesus is around everybody. And that's the thing, that we have responsibilities to meet those people in a kind way. And that's not always easy. But I think that we can get so hung up on all the church rituals and the church things, where I think it needs to go back to being kind to others. What they say, the Pope says the big two things are love and mercy. And I think that we really need to work that out with other people.
No, I agree. I think it's more, the rituals should lead us back to the relationships with other people. And those rituals should be an expression of a relationship. And what Father Taylor was talking about, yeah, it's those relationships that we have with other people. So I totally agree with that. And how much time do we spend not just being kind to people? And when Father Taylor was telling us in his discussion about, we're all excited about putting up the tree, but not every brother is excited about the tree. So we're not going to force it, but we're going to invite them into that. We're going to make it a celebration, and we're going to invite them into different community events during this next 20 days of prayer and of time of celebration and different things. So I think as we get out into the grocery stores and different things that we do, it's being kind to others, and recognizing others, being aware of others, especially if we're going to Christmas parties and things like that. Recognize those people that are having a hard time in a Christmas party or are having a hard time in this time of year. So I agree. Anybody else like to share anything? Any other comments on this subject, or any other things, other questions that I asked? Or you might have a question or a comment from anything else that Father Terry talked about. All right. Well, thank you.
I'd like to offer something.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I want to just make a comment about something wonderful in my life that I have been waiting for. And I think of Advent as waiting patiently and tolerant and being tolerant. And I have a 5-year-old grandson who has not had any religious experience or training until this year. Now he has had 2 months of Zooming Bible school on, and he asked his 3-year-old brother, "Do you know who Jesus is?" And the 3-year-old had nothing to say. He said, "He is God's son and he loves you." And that's the lesson of 2 months of a preschool Bible study for my grandson. And I'm very excited that I can share a real Christmas with their family.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
guess it goes along with good things come to those who wait.
Yes.
Yes,
That's a wonderful story.
yes. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything to share?
No, I think
All
just
right.
for grandchildren. Oh.
Go
nothing.
ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, just that really was very kind, very nice of the woman sharing that, because I think with grandchildren, my grandchildren live far away, and with COVID, we haven't seen each other for almost 2 years. And so I think some of the stuff of Christmas can be diminished just with our isolation because of COVID. And so that makes it more important for us to reach out to others, to the people in the checkout lines and the people at the stores, not just the people that we know and that accept us. So there are some real challenges of Advent.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough part is we have a hard time sometimes with people we know, but people that we don't know, making that effort to say hello or a kind smile or anything like that.
Right.
To be aware of other people in your presence, which a lot of times, if I'm at the grocery store, I've got to go do this and get out of there or whatever, rather than just taking the time to be aware of people around me. So that's a great point.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody for joining us today. Thank you for your time. And we will be back again next week at 2 o'clock Mountain Time. Father Terry will be sharing. And then we'll have a third session December 5th. So December 8th and December 15th, same Zoom number. Any new information will be on snowmassbookstore.com. Thanks everybody for their time, and appreciate your comment.
Thank you for offering this. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Very much.